Hello and welcome back to the annual Action Figure Award, and for today's episode we will be crowning the best and most disappointing action figures of 2020. Of course, it's only fair that I crown figures that I've actually reviewed on this channel. And since 2020 has been such a hectic year, it was pretty easy to choose from the list, as there isn't a lot to choose from. Also, I can only crown figures that were released in 2020, so unfortunately my favorite Hulkbuster will not be getting a crown in today's list. Also, any comments about these figures are based on my humble opinion, so we can agree to disagree, and let's have a peaceful discussion. So with that all said, let's begin with my 5 most disappointing figures I've reviewed in 2020. So starting with number 5, Fighting Armor Iron Man. What? Seriously? I know, I couldn't believe it myself. Let me set the record straight. I love this action figure line. I think they put out some of the best Iron Man action figures in the market. However, this isn't the best Iron Man action figure they've put out. It can be considered as being one of the most posable 6-inch Iron Man action figure out there, but to me, there's a lot of weird design choices on the appearance, such as the boxy look, which in some areas make it look anatomically weird, and it's even more disappointing when you see them putting out the same mold for future figures like the Spider-Man and Captain America figure, whilst only changing the chest plate and the face, so it makes this Iron Man a lot less unique. Also, there's no light up effect, even though the box was giving you a false impression that they might be one, but nope. No lights and only 2 additional pairs of hands. So normally I can justify the little to no accessory or missing features if the figure itself was a knockout, and this figure unfortunately isn't one to me. Number 4, SH Figure Arts 1989 Batman. When Bandai puts in all of their effort into their figures, normally it will result as the figure being one of the best versions of that character, but this package is an example of Bandai trying way too hard and overthinking some of their design choices, which was a detriment to this figure. For example, they wanted to give the cape a premium feeling, and that resulted in this figure not having the ability to even fold his cape back properly, and ended up causing hindrance to his articulation in some areas. And I've already said in the review, and I'll say it again, really? No accessory where Batman looks to the left. Also, this figure was a Tamashii Web exclusive, which meant it cost a lot to purchase, and it's disappointing to receive a figure which you thought would be as premium as the price you paid for, but the results are only subpar. Number 3, EAA 116 Bro Thor by Beast Kingdom. Any Thor figure that cannot hold his own hammer or axe deserves to be in this list. What were you thinking, Beast Kingdom? Even if you want to justify that this is the form where he's not in the heat of the battle, therefore there is no need for him to hold his axe, and if that was indeed the reason, then it is utter nonsense. Not to mention the belly itself looks like what it is, a man wearing a fake pouch. I mean, the material isn't even matching to the rest of his body. His head is limited to his long hair, which is still fine, but there's just a lot of questionable decisions made on this package, which turned what would have been a really fun figure into a figure with many flaws. How could he not hold the axe? I mean, come on. Number 2, Muffex Carnage. This was a hard one to place. The accessories provided to this figure was plentiful, and the figure itself looks great, but the issues on this figure, at least for my figure, was so bad that it made it almost unplayable, such as the issue with the loose arm joint, the head connection, also the fact both of the legs of my Carnage figure got so tight that it let out an alarming creaking sound. And sure, all of these issues can be fixed in some way, but what doesn't make sense to me is why you should be fixing anything in the first place. I mean, if you're using your hard-earned cash to purchase an item, you'd expect that item to be working perfectly, or at least close to it when you receive it. But this figure was far from any of that. This figure illustrates one of Medicom Toys' biggest flaws when it comes to quality control, and they really need to step up their game, because they've been really inconsistent in their releases, and it just shakes my confidence in purchasing future Mafex figures, which is a shame because I really like this line. But this figure really left a very bad impression on the current state of the Mafex line. Number 1. 1. Imagination Works Son Goku. The king of the crotch, and I don't mean that as a compliment. There was a lot of expectations on this figure as Bandai heavily promoted this figure and made plenty of promises, much like Cyberpunk's 2077. And like Cyberpunk 2077, it failed to deliver on half of its promises, and that failed half is on his entire bottom half. As mentioned in my review, the top half of this figure was great, with the introduction of jointless bicep flex, and they've tried their best to conceal as many joints as they possibly can, and the sculpting and painting work is great. Plenty of accessories to play around with, but man, that crotch, it fails on so many levels, and it definitely brought this figure as potentially being one of the greatest Goku action figure to being just okay. This action figure may not be as bad as other action figures, but the disappointment I felt after opening this package was definitely the highest among all the other action figures in the list. Man, I really wish I didn't pay a premium for this figure. Oh, the pain. It's kinda disappointing to me that 4 out of the 5 figures in this list was the last 4 new figures I've reviewed on 2020. And don't get me wrong, that does not mean to say that they are absolutely terrible figures. That's why the list is called Disappointing Figures of 2020, not Worst Figures of 2020. Because I'm saying of all the figures I've reviewed in 2020, these action figures did not live up to their expectation in one way or the other. But let's not think about disappointments anymore, because I love to end this episode with a positive feeling, so I want to talk about the best action figures I've reviewed in 2020. And there's actually a lot of figures I want to put in the list, but I just have to narrow it down to 5. So I just want to give an honorable mention to these figures. Mafex Thor. 2 body accessories is like having 2 figures for the price of 1, and the fact this wasn't plagued by the disease brings this to this honorable list. Mafex Cyclops. Simple, straight to the point, great sculpt, paintwork, and detail, and given the right amount of accessories, when Mafex does it right, their figures are really great. 1000 Toys Dante. If there's one thing 1000 Toys do, is that they produce really high quality figures. However, this figure falls a little short due to the hair being mismatched, but the figure itself as well as the accessories are great, but its competitor on the list just edges this figure by just that much. All of them were really close to being in the list, but there can only be 5 in the top list, and these 5 action figures blew my mind, and it made me think about them whenever I'm reviewing other figures. So starting with number 5. EAA 133 Tony Stark Nanosuit version. This was the complete opposite of what the Bro Thor figure represents. If you've ever tried to imagine how Robert Downey Jr. would look like in caricature, this would be it. The material used was great, the articulation itself was great for this kind of figure, the light up features, the movable eye feature, everything in this package was just right. And this figure was a lot of fun to play with, which is ironic as I thought the Bro Thor figure would have been a lot more fun, but as it turns out, Tony Stark's the one bringing home the dough. Number 4. 1000 Toys Nero. This place could have gone to the Dante figure if not for one small aspect that this figure got right that the other did not. I already mentioned it. The haircut. Yes, my Dante figure had this gap where the forehead meets the hairline, which made Dante look like he's wearing a wig, and Nero did not. And of course, that's not the only reason, even though this reason did give Nero some brownie points. The facial expressions on the Nero figure look much closer to the character than the Dante figure. The jacket accessory was a lot cleaner in the sewing, and when it comes to the figure itself, it's just an amazingly sculpted and engineered figure. And the Dante figure is essentially the same figure, engineering wise, and the accessories on both packages are unique to their own character. However, to me, you'd need to have the deluxe version of the Dante figure to really make it worthwhile, but for the Nero figure, the base version of this package is a great enough experience that it doesn't warrant a purchase of the deluxe version, which is why as a whole package, the 1000 Toys Nero package is just an amazing package to have in my collection. Number 3. Mafex Batman. Hush. Jim Lee's Batman, and I'm glad Mafex didn't try to do anything extra with this and just stuck true to the comics. And of course, it's in the top 5 list because this is one of the few Mafex figures that I have that wasn't plagued with the disease. But it's not only that, this is an amazingly sculpted, painted and articulated figure with plenty of accessories to play around with. If you're looking for the most complete Batman package from the comics, then look no further than the Mafex Hush Batman, because it's got everything you'd ever want in a comic Batman action figure. There's also a black and grey variant, but you don't get the unmasked head, however you do get the gargoyle stand, if you're into gargoyles. Number 2. SH Figure Arts Spider-Man, aka Toei Spider-Man. This was a surprise, but it's a pleasant one. I don't follow the series, and looking at the design at first, I was ready to make fun of this figure and have a blast doing it. But it ended up me loving this action figure, and still having a blast playing with it, which is a huge win-win in my books. This clearly shows how much additional efforts Bandai puts in their own local characters. It was one of the few Spider-Man figures to finally receive the bicep swivel. The figure itself was meticulously sculpted to the point where they even included the misaligned eyes, which may be a trigger to some people, but it's accurate to the character, and is an extremely posable Spider-Man figure with a ton of accessories to play with. But I'm already singing so much praise to this figure, why isn't it number 1? Well, that's because my best reviewed action figure of 2020 goes to number 1. SH Figure Arts Iron Spider. What? 2 Spider-Man action figures being on top? How can that be? Well, what can I say? When Bandai pours all of their efforts into a figure, they can really blow their competition out of the water, and this figure had it all in 2020. The complete remake on the design from the very disappointing predecessor, and they stayed true to the sculpt and color scheme of the character this time. Not to mention, this was the first Spider-Man I received from SH Figure Arts that has the bicep swivel, a feature that I've been begging Bandai to have on their Spider-Man figures since the very beginning, and they included all of the accessories shown in the movie, such as the Infinity Iron Gauntlet, the Kill Mode eyes, the iron legs, which is a lot sturdier from the predecessor too, and the unmasked Tom Holland head. With an action figure like that and all that accessories, how could you say this figure does not deserve a place at the top? Which is why this is not only my best reviewed action figure of 2020, but it is also the most improved action figure of 2020. This is SH Figure Arts at its best. It's been a while since I've said something like this to a base SH Figure Arts figure that isn't on this Shin Kocho Seiho line, and it feels really good to have them back. Well done, Bandai. With that all said, that concludes my top 5 of the most disappointing and best action figures that were released and reviewed on my channel in 2020. And all of the top 5 action figures brought the best qualities their respective companies have to offer, and I wish the companies will improve for the other 5 disappointing action figures so it'll turn the tide and maybe even bring more action figures to compete for the best in 2021. Anyway, I hope all of you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, do consider hitting that like button or just hit it for the sake of ending 2020. And remember, all of the figures listed in this list are purely based on my own opinion. So I would like to know which action figures makes it to your disappointing and best figure list. Share it with me in the comment section down below. Or if you'd like to let me know which of these figures did not deserve its placing, let me know in the comments as well. And one final thing to do for 2020, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you all for helping this channel reach 20,000 subscribers before the end of 2020. If I had an achievement box, it would have said 20k 2020 with a nice green tick. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and I am truly grateful for any one of you who's watching the content on this channel. You're the reason why I can keep going, and I'm forever grateful for that. I'd like to close today's episode by wishing all of you a very belated Merry Christmas, and I hope all of you will have a Happy New Year. Let's close this shitty year and start the next one stronger than ever. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, wash your hands, stay safe, and I'll see all of you next year. To watch more, click here. Click here for video 1. Click here for video 2. Click here to subscribe. Click it. Thank you for watching. Arigato. Thank you.